Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute. We're just going to let everybody log on. Welcome. If you're just joining us, we're going to get started in just a minute. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to the pre-solicitation conference for DIR-CPO-TMP-584 Oracle branded products and related services, otherwise known as RFO 584. Next slide. Before we get started, we would like to go over a few housekeeping rules and notes. We would like to remind everyone that you can switch your audio between your computer audio and your phone calls. The attendees will be muted. Can everybody please raise their hand to confirm that they can hear me? Perfect. Thank you so much. The chat will be disabled today. If you would like to submit a questions, please put that in the Q&A. And we would like to remind everyone that this handout will be available in the addendum. Next slide. I would like to introduce the speakers today. We have Jared, our procurement lead. We have Vanya, another procurement lead, Marie Cohan with the statewide digital accessibility, and then we have Teresa Williamson with the Hub program. Next slide. I will now turn it over to Jared.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining. Again, this is Jared Fortenberry. I'm the procurement lead assigned to this solicitation, and we're just going to go over the agenda. So we're going to take a look at the RFO. I'm going to have an overview. We're going to look at the contents, take a quick look at high level at the scope. We'll go over the evaluation criteria, the term that's intended for this contract. And we're going to look at the schedule, have some comments there. And we'll also have a presentation on some of the hub requirements and the accessibility requirements and some more information to help you out. We'll look at some general information associated with the solicitation. We'll also go over the VIS portal that you'll be using to submit your responses and questions if you're not already familiar. We'll take a look at the pricing sheet and some of those requirements. Also, we'll look at those submissions that are required with your response. And then we'll take a quick break so that we can sort of gather our thoughts, and we'll take any questions that you might have. I will say, and I'm going to say this a few times throughout the presentation, any questions or information that we give here is unofficial until it's posted as an addendum. So if we give a response to a question, that is, again, unofficial until we post it to the ESPD. And then we will close the conference. So next slide, please. RFO overview. So the purpose of the RFO is to solicit responses from vendors to provide Oracle branded products and related services to Texas, acting by and through the Department of Information Resources. This is a resolicitation of a prior solicitation, DIR-CPO-TMP-584, which is also Oracle branded products and related services. And just for your knowledge, DIR may make multiple awards from this RFO where we have multiple qualified respondents. Next slide, please. Just taking a look here at some of the historical data for sales. The top table you see there is the DIR cooperative contract sales over the past few fiscal years. So you can see it's kind of gone up from 2.7 billion in 2021 to around 3 billion in 2022 to 3.3 billion in 2023. So we've We have a steady increase each year. And then below is the sales from the prior Oracle solicitation RFO 415. And that's around 94 million in 2021. Around 92, there was a dip there in 2022, and then up to 129 for FY 2023. Next slide, please. So next, we're going to take a look at some of the contents you'll see whenever you pull those documents from the ESBD. Next slide, please. DIR-CPO-TMP-584 documents. So Exhibit A is your respondent information. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on these in just a second. Exhibit B is your history and experience. Exhibit C is the contract marketing and support plan. Exhibit D is your hub plan. The Exhibit E is your pricing sheet. Exhibit F are the reference forms that you'll have your references submit. Next slide, please. Exhibit G is your release of liability, your respondent release of liability. Exhibit H is your EDGAR certification form. Exhibit I is your PDAA. Exhibit J is your VPAT, and Exhibit K is your VADSIR. And those will, again, go into a little bit more detail on later on in the presentation. Next slide, please. So Exhibit A, that's your respondent information. So you have to fill it out in its entirety, and it has to be signed by an officer or agent empowered to contractually bind your organization. You also have to complete the canceled contract references if that applies. Respondent history and experience, Exhibit B. So you have to provide a detailed response to each question, detailing the respondent's history and experience and providing the products and services proposed. And a minor note here, answer those in the order that they're presented. I know that may seem self-evident to a lot of you who are experienced, but please make sure you're answering each question in the order they're asked and providing complete responses to each question so that we're not having to figure out where your answer is. Please make sure they're answered in the order they're presented. Next slide, please. Exhibit C is your marketing customer support plan. So you're going to provide us a detailed response to each question, telling us about your ability and strategy for promoting and supporting the contract to DIR's customers. So that's state agencies, school districts, municipalities, counties, etc. Exhibit D is your HSP form. You'll have to provide your HSP form as instructed in 3.4.1. The vendors, so there shouldn't be a new form, but there's a link in the RFO. You should use that to make sure that you have the latest form to provide with your response. Exhibit E is your itemized pricing sheet. So you'll complete the itemized pricing sheet, complete all tabs which are applicable for your proposal. Again, I'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. Next slide, please. Exhibit F is your vendor references. You'll send your reference form to a minimum of 3 companies or government agencies that you've done work for in the past. Your references have to respond to DIR in the form provided by the due date in order to be considered for evaluation. So you cannot, as a respondent, submit your reference forms to DIR. Those have to be provided to DIR via the email that's listed on that form to be considered. Exhibit G, respondent release of liability for references. So that's required for all canceled contracts and have to be provided to DIR with your respondent's proposal. Or with the respondent's proposal, that's you. Your EDGAR certification form. Please provide your EDGAR certification form as requested in 361 of the RFO. Next slide. So these 3 are your accessibility documents. Those are going to be discussed in greater detail later on, but just know that so your PDA needs to be submitted and then VPAT and VADSIR as necessary. Next slide, please. So the RFO scope. Next slide. So we're just going to take a high-level view here. So we're intending, like we said earlier, to contract for Oracle branded products and related services. It's your responsibility to ensure that the products or services proposed are within the scope of this solicitation. That is a spelling error or a missing word. I will say that the scope here is pretty broad, right? So that shouldn't be too difficult, but there are some exclusions we'll go over in a little bit. You can submit for products and value-added services in the following areas. So first, Oracle branded products. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but that statement says they include, but they're not limited to. So there could be other categories. This is just to give you an idea. So Oracle servers, software systems, applications, middleware, and storage. Again, there could be additional categories under Oracle branded products. So to classify that, it's products that are manufactured, produced, and published by or carry the brand of Oracle or a majority owned subsidiary of an Oracle entity. Next slide, please. Next, so related services. Those are those that you can perform related to Oracle branded products as described earlier. They can be sold separately from products. They include, but again, are not limited to, product support, installation, integration, maintenance, managed services, product training, and comparable value-added services as designated by the manufacturer of those Oracle products. This is also a pretty broad category. Next slide. And then to make it explicit, so this does also include Oracle Cloud Services. We intend to provide Oracle branded cloud services for our customers. We follow NIST 800-145. I didn't include all that here because it's in the RFO. So each DIR customer will determine when their services are appropriate for their business needs and identify the precise services to be utilized. Then we'll create a plan for implementation of those services. Next slide. Third-party products. So this is one we'll want to get into. The only third-party products within the scope of the RFO are third-party software products that are embedded, integrated, or installed within Oracle branded products at the time of purchase. Third-party software can't be sold separately from Oracle branded products under the RFO. Third-party hardware and peripherals are not within scope of this RFO. So third-party products that are not within scope can't be proposed in your response. Permissible third-party products can be proposed as an option and will be awarded at DIR's discretion. Any respondent offering third-party products has to submit a description of those products and the related pricing on our automated pricing form in BidStamp BIS. You can incorporate changes to your authorized third-party products offerings, but those changes have to be within the scope described in the section. So there is some flexibility there. By listing a third-party manufacturer brand and proposing a pricing discount off of that MSRP, you attest that you have authorization from the manufacturer to resell those products on a resulting DIR contract. And DIR can at a future time request a letter of authorization from the manufacturer stating that you do have that authorization to sell those products or that you have the certifications to provide those services on a DIR contract. Next slide, please. So exclusions. The following products are not included within the scope: custom application or development services, deliverables-based information technology services or DBITS, cloud assessment services, as those are explicitly included on the DBITS contract or DBITS solicitation. Professional or consulting services. Out of scope products could also be third-party hardware and peripherals, like I said earlier, third-party software that's not embedded, integrated, or installed within Oracle branded products. Or anything that's on the state prohibited software applications developers list. You can find it at that link below. And we'll include this, like she said earlier, in the addendum that we post with these slides. Next slide, please. Evaluation criteria. Next slide. So we have some pass-fail criteria. Whenever your responses come in, they'll go through an admin review. So we'll review to make sure that the Exhibit A is completed and signed. If it is not signed, it's a non-responsive submission. Completed PDAA, which is necessary, VPATs and VADSER when those are applicable, and your hub subcontracting plan has to be completed and signed. I will say, not to jump over into hub, they'll talk about it in detail. Please make sure that if you're submitting a hub subcontracting plan, and your hub vendors that you are conducting your outreach with, please make sure they are hub certified. I would recommend that you check before you send that correspondence out to make sure that you're using valid hub vendors. So the financial review will be next. Please make sure on your Exhibit A that you provide us a valid DUNS number because we'll use that to do our financial review. Also, if the DUNS number, or excuse me, the address on your Exhibit A needs to match the principal place of business that's in your Dun & Bradstreet profile. Next slide, please. Oh, and if it doesn't, then we'll probably reach out and result. So evaluation of responses. So incomplete response packages will be rejected. Financial review and HSP review are on a pass-fail basis, like I said in the previous slide. Failure to provide a DUNS number can result in your response being disqualified. Only responses that receive a passing grade will move to the next evaluation phase. So if you trip up on any of those hurdles, you won't move forward to the actual weighted evaluation. And our weighted evaluation criteria for this solicitation are the respondent history and experience plan. Experience, so Exhibit B will be 30%. The contract marketing and customer support plan, Exhibit C, will be 30%. And the itemized pricing sheet, including the VIS portion, so products and services, will be 40% of your evaluation weight. Next slide, please. Moving on to the contract. Next slide. So the term, section 2.7 will tell you that we are planning on an initial term of 2 years with one optional 2-year renewal and one optional 1-year renewal that will be exercised at DIR's discretion. And there's also an option to extend for 90 days beyond the initial or any subsequent renewal contract term. So just a contractual extension of 90 days if we need to, again, to be exercised at DIR's discretion. Next slide. Contract website requirements. So if you look at section 7 of the sample contract document that we included with the RFO documents, so it'll tell you, in addition to the requirements listed in Appendix A, section 7.2, you have to include the following information on your DIR contract webpage. So the current price list or mechanism to obtain specific contract pricing, the MSRP or list price or the DIR customer price, a discount percentage off MSRP or list price, which that'll also be included on your pricing index that we post on the DIR website with your contract documents. Any warranty policies or return policies. Next slide. The RFO schedule. Next slide. So as it stands, this is the current solicitation schedule. So it was published on November 30th. The pre-proposal webinar, we are all here. It is today at 1 o'clock. And the deadline for submitting questions is December 20th. So also today at 5. So we have, I have currently drafted an extension for that deadline to January 10th. But again, anything that's as it stands right now, this is where we are. But I do anticipate that being approved and posted in the next few days. And then going along with that, the response deadline and deadline for submitting your vendor references is currently January 18th. I anticipate that being pushed out to February 1st. But again, until I post that, it's not official. Just, I don't want anybody to freak out if they don't have their questions in today. So, and then from that point, we'll do evaluation from January until those are completed. So evaluation, negotiation, and award. Next slide, please. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Teresa to go over the hub subcontracting plan.
Thank you, Jared. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Teresa Williamson. I'm the Hub Program Manager. Let's talk about the importance of submitting a completed, signed Hub subcontracting plan. Next slide. All vendors, Hub and non-Hub, will complete and sign a Hub subcontracting plan, also known as an HSP. Please visit the link that's provided for the most current approved copy of the Hub subcontracting plan. You will be required to download the HSP form there and complete it. Please do not modify this document in an editable copy. Next slide. All respondents, again, Hub and non-Hub, are required to submit a completed and signed HSP. Failure to submit a completed, signed HSP will cause your response to be rejected, and you will not move forward with the solicitation. There are 3 ways to complete your HSP. The first is to meet or exceed the Hub goal and complete method A. The second is to not meet the Hub goal and complete method B. And the third is to self-perform. Next slide. The Hub goal for this RFO is 21.1%. If your proposed subcontracting meets or exceeds the 21.1% Hub goal, you'll complete method A. Be sure to identify all hub and non-hub vendors that you will be subcontracting with and include the anticipated dollar amount and expected percentages. So you will complete sections 1, 2, 4, and the method A, attachment A. Please don't forget to sign and date your HSP in your section 4. Next slide. If you are going to subcontract below the hub goal, you'll complete method B. Be sure to solicit a minimum of 3 hub certified companies and 2 minority trade organizations. With the method B good faith effort, you must allow them 7 working days to respond to you prior to the due date of this RFO. Include your outreach to these entities with your HSP submission. So you will complete sections 1, 2, 4, and the method B, attachment B. Don't forget to include your approximate dollar amounts and percentages. Also, please allow yourself plenty of time to complete your method B good faith effort. Please remember that the day that you send out your correspondence is considered day 0. I've seen many companies submit incomplete method B good faith efforts and fail the process because of it. So please give yourself plenty of time to follow through with the instructions when completing this method. Next slide. If you will be self-performing, you will complete sections 1, 2, 3, and 4. In your self-performing justification, you identify how your company will fulfill this contract or a contract should you be awarded with its own staff, equipment, and resources. Please do not say that you'll subcontract in the future or if you need to. You just simply need to tell us how you plan to self-perform should that contract be awarded. Next slide. My contact information is listed here. The hub office will provide you with a complimentary review of your HSP prior to the due date as time permits. You must contact us no later than 10 days prior to the due date of this RFO. Take advantage of that complimentary review and remember that when corresponding with the hub office to make sure that you're including Jared. He's the procurement lead on this RFO on all correspondence. Next slide. Turn it over to Marie.
Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate that. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go through the digital accessibility requirements for the solicitation. Next slide, please. So digital accessibility refers to the inclusive practice of design and building technology that removes barriers for people with disabilities. This includes electronic and information resources or information and communications technology. The state of Texas is very committed to ensuring that our technology is accessible to everyone. We have this Texas Government Code Chapter 2054, Subchapter M, that outlines the statute for that requirement. We also have TAC 206 for website accessibility and TAC 213 for all other electronic and information resources. So this would include software and hardware. And the state of Texas follows best practices in the industry. So we follow the World Wide Web Consortium Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The baseline for the state of Texas is 2.0 AA. And we expect that our vendors will support the state of Texas by providing accessible technology. And I'll go into the supporting documentation for this endeavor. Next slide, please. So there are 3 documents that could accompany your solicitation response. It will depend on what is in the response as far as product and service offerings. The policy-driven adoption for accessibility is a vendor self-assessment. This is required regardless of your product or service offerings. This has nothing to do with the offerings in your response. This is strictly has to do with the organization that is responding to assess your accessibility maturity. And then we have accessibility conformance reports, which are a completed VPAT. The VPAT is for products in your response. And the vendor accessibility development services information request is specific to any type of development services. So I will go into each of these in more detail. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the Policy-Driven Adoption for Accessibility, or PDAA. This is a spreadsheet that is included in your solicitation packet. It is a self-assessment of your organization. So if you have any subcontracting or anything like that, this is not for that organization. It is for the respondents organization. There are some questions on there related to your accessibility policies and practices, just to help us understand where your organization is at as far as accessibility maturity is concerned. You will respond by providing a score of 0, 1, 2, or 3 for each of those questions. And then the spreadsheet will total your score at the bottom, and that score will be taken into consideration for the accessibility evaluation. If this document is submitted blank or materially incomplete or not submitted at all, it could disqualify your response. So I encourage you to read through all of the questions and answer them as best as you can. And again, that'll be a 0, 1, 2, or 3 response. And if you do submit it with a 0 and it is fully completed, that will be a fail. So please review those carefully and let us know, even if you're at a very early stage of implementing accessibility policies in your organization, go ahead and put that score down of a 1 for each of those questions so you can get a score. Next slide, please. This is an example of the PDAA maturity matrix. The 3 big areas are initial stage or launch, an integrated stage, or optimized stage. Launch is pretty self-explanatory. You're starting to think about employing some accessibility practices within your organization. When you get into integrated, you have those policies outlined. You may have some processes documented for each business area of your organization, and you're employing those practices. And then optimize is everything is pretty well set. You've got some good policies in place. You have documented processes in place. They are repeatable. You've monitored those processes to ensure that they stay as they are. And then you're able to expand even further into your organization with accessibility. Next slide, please. So we'll talk now about the product side of your responses. So you hear a lot about the VPAT. That is the Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. It is an industry standard template that is used for all products. And the way the VPAT works is you test your product for accessibility against the WCAG standards and success criteria. And for each of those success criteria that it's expected for a particular feature, you will put down if your product conforms or supports, if it partially supports, if it does not support, etc. So we are looking for how your product conforms to those success criteria. Once it is completed, it becomes an accessibility conformance report, or ACR. And that is what you will submit in your response for each product listed on your pricing sheet. I think that's about it. The VPAT 2.3 or higher version will be accepted. I believe we're up to 2.5 now. So 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 are all acceptable. If you have a lower version of a VPAT that you've used, so your ACR that you currently have is older, it is only accepted if the product has not undergone any changes at all to the user interface since April 18th of 2020. So if your product has gone through any changes since that date, you will need to submit a new accessibility conformance report. Next slide, please. This is an example of the WCAG standards. Each of those standards has success criteria. This is what you will be testing your product against. This is a very high level version. You can always find a detailed version at the ITIC website or US Access Board website, and those links are on our website, and I think they're in the presentation as well. Next slide, please. The product conformance for those success criteria is going to be supports with exceptions, does not support, not applicable, or not evaluated. Not evaluated is acceptable for anything that's level AAA because we do not require that level. Our baseline for the state of Texas is WCAG 2.0 AA. However, our state of Texas agencies and institutions of higher education that will purchase off of this master contract have the discretion to require a higher standard. So they may have a WCAG 2.1 AA as their standard. And so just be prepared that that agency may ask for an ACR that has been tested against that level. And they have the discretion to do that. And if they request an ACR from the vendor is required to submit that to the agency. Next slide, please. So moving away from products, if you have any development services in your solicitation response, which for this particular solicitation I did not see, but on the off chance that that does come up during some sort of engagement, you will complete this form. This form asks questions around your software development lifecycle and how accessibility is incorporated into the software development lifecycle. It also asks what kind of training your developers have received with regard to accessibility. Have they tested? What is their testing practices? What kind of testing assistive technology do they use? How do they track testing? How do they remediate? What kind of safeguards are in place to make sure that they've corrected all errors, and then it'll ask for a sample. And I do have an example of this form on the next slide. So it's just general information at the top of the form. And next slide. These are the questions that I just described. I recommend that you put as much detail as possible on this form. It really helps us understand how solid your accessibility practices are when it comes to development. And also when you do get your products tested on the ACR, I forgot to mention, if you have a level that is non-conformant or partially conformant, please put an explanation in the field that's provided. Each of those success criteria will have a field for explanations. I highly recommend that you fill those out for anything that is not fully supported. Next slide, please. One more point. I notice on the scope, it includes support and support documentation. Any digital documentation that is provided as a support document for your product should also be accessible. So be aware of that too. We provide digital accessibility training for our vendors. This is provided at no cost to the vendor. If you would like to sign up to have access to these classes, you can email me at statewide@dir.texas.gov. If you email me to request registration, please copy Jared on that email as well. Each of these courses takes about 45 to 60 minutes to complete. They are very helpful. 3 of the courses are specific to doing business in Texas. The other one is just a general guideline to digital accessibility. Next slide, please. These are some links that are helpful. Most of these are included in your packet, but if you need additional support, you can find information at these links. And I think the next slide has my contact information on there. Like the Hub program, I am now doing complimentary reviews of PDAAs and VADSERs only. I cannot review your ACRs ahead of time because that's a more binary type of document. But if you would like a review of your PDAA or a VADSER, which if doesn't really apply in this particular solicitation, I can go ahead and review those for you. You will just contact me at that email address and make sure that you copy Jared as well as your procurement lead. Thank you very much for your time today, and I'm going to hand it back over to Jared.
Thank you very much, Marie. And let's go ahead and take a look at some general information with regard to the RFO. Next slide, please. So whenever we're asking questions, I just want to make sure that everyone reference, please, the RFO page number and the section number. So it helps us whenever we're trying to research a response and make sure that we're providing an accurate answer. So you can submit questions electronically at any time during the webinar. Just use the questions tab. I will say and reiterate, any questions that are answered here, it's unofficial until we post an addendum with that Q&A. I do expect that Q&A deadline to be extended in the next few days. So again, you see the red date below, December 20th, 5 p.m. Don't panic. You're going to have additional time to submit additional questions. So I will say, check the ESPD often for updates, especially that addendum, just to make sure you're aware, because ultimately you'll have to submit that, sign it. Next slide, please. Disqualification. So there are some things that can cause your response to be disqualified, and we'll just kind of go through them quickly so you're aware. Failure to sign your Exhibit A, that's a big one. Please sign it. Make sure it's an easy thing to do that trips a lot of vendors up. Failure to complete your financial information or provide that financial information, so your DUNS number. Failure to complete and sign your hub subcontracting plan. Please make sure you do this ahead of time. Failure to complete and submit Exhibit E, your itemized pricing sheet. Obviously, we can't evaluate your proposal without that information. So failure to complete your Exhibit I PDA-A, failure to submit on or before the due date and time. And again, I anticipate that being extended in the next few days. And this last one, we're going to talk about it. I'm going to say it multiple times. Contact with a DIR employee regarding the RFO other than designated contacts. So there are contacts listed in this presentation for different things. Any contact with those individuals should be sort of narrowed to the scope of those topics. But really, just make sure you're sending all of your correspondence through me or to those individuals regarding those specific topics. And delivery of your responses. So any vendor responding to the RFO has to submit their response through the bid stamp BIS. We don't accept paper submissions or email submissions. Please make sure you have your account set up and you're ready to submit. Next slide, please. And I know I just said this, but we say it twice because it matters. Respondents and all respondent representatives shall not attempt to discuss contents of the RFO with any employees or representatives of DIR other than designated contacts. Failure to observe this restriction can result in disqualification. Next slide, please. So here are some general contacts. So any normal inquiry regarding the solicitation, you can always contact me, right? I'm the primary contact for the RFO. If you have any issues with the vendor information system, you can also send those to me and I'll either direct you or handle it. And then for hub subcontracting plans, you can contact Teresa at the email below. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Vanya to go over the vendor information system.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Vanya Raymakers. I'm a procurement lead, and I am going to talk about the VIS portal, how you are going to submit your response to the RFO. Before I get started, I like to show of hands, how many of the people on this call are new to the VIS portal? I just don't want to talk you all to death. So I want to make sure that we got, I don't see any hands. Everybody new or everybody is not new?
I see a few hands.
Oh,
there were around 6, I think.
6 that are brand new? Okay. Thank you, Jared. I guess in this case, we're just going to talk a lot. Next slide. So first thing to know is that responding to this RFO must be submitted through the system. The bid stamp system requires that you have an access code and you need to request that if you don't have one already. For the vendors that have done this before, I want to remind you that sometime in September, October, we did do a major upgrade to that system, and there is a different site, and you needed to go ahead and get your access credentials revised or renewed or pointed to the new site. So I strongly recommend everyone responding to this RFO that you log in and make sure that everything on your bid stamp VIS portal account actually it work, that you can get in, that you can access all the information, okay? Do your due diligence prior to the due date. We have an amazing IT folks that takes care of vendors during the bid submissions for any RFO, but I kind of like to see them work less because they do a lot. So if you can do this ahead of time to solve any of your issues, it would be greatly appreciated by our IT folks so they don't have to do it all in one day. If a vendor does not yet have a login credential, as we talked about it, you need to click on request an account button that is located on the login page. We're going to go through each section of the Bitstamp account, but here's a link in case you need to view the video on how to set up your Bitstamp account. Next slide. Persons with disability who seek accommodation under the ADA and respond to the solicitation may contact DIR. We gave you information on section 3.1, and I really would like, if you guys need any accommodations to submit your bid, that you do it way before 5 business days to the response due date, so as soon as possible, so that accommodations can be made. Next slide. So we're going to go through some information, and before I get started, I kind of want you guys to know something. What I'm going to give you is an abbreviated check. Like, I'm just going to show you guys the main things that are important. We do have a total video on how to do this. We also have a Bitstamp guide for you guys, and I'm going to show you where that is. And I strongly recommend that you download that document, read it, highlight it, work with it, because it will provide you the information you need to provide your response correctly, okay? So how to navigate the Bitstamp vendor login from our website. So you go into Selling Through DIR. So you're going to scroll down on the web page. Go ahead, next slide. So we're still on the front page. You're scrolling Schedule of Solicitation Opportunities. You're going to click on that. Keep scrolling. Next slide. And now you're going to see this at the very bottom of the page, Bitstamp Online Solicitation Portable, Request Credentials for Bitstamp Access. And here is that guide I told you about. Right below the Bitstamp login, there is a guide for you to download, read, highlight, work with it. Bitstamp is a very kind of a easy user kind of a system. Doesn't have a lot of what I call trick buttons. It's very easy, but it doesn't hurt to really learn the steps, to not do it at the last minute, okay? So we're going to scroll down the page some more. Next slide. And this is what you're going to see. Once you log in, you will see this screen. You're going to put in your username and password that you've been given. There's a button here that says you forgot your password. You can request an account, all over here. So you should be able to get to your login screen through our website, or you can also have it saved on your favorites. And there's the website connection. Next slide. So when you go into your Bitstamp account, this is what you're going to see. This is your vendor community main menu, okay? So these are the 6 menu buttons that you are going to use constantly. My account means you are going to keep up with your own information. As your vendor account, you should always have up-to-date information here, because a lot of times we use the Bitstamp membership accounts to send that notice. And if your account's not up to date, the email is wrong, or information is not correct, you're not going to get notices from DIR. So I want to make sure that you understand how important it is to maintain your Bitstamp account, not just for this solicitation, but for DIR ongoing. As long as you're going to be a vendor with us, you should maintain your account with up-to-date information. Open solicitations, you're the next button. So this is, you're going to go in here in a minute. I'm going to show you what it looks like. You're going to find the solicitation you're responding to click on it. And then your responses, you can actually say you're responding to more than one RFO at a time. This button will take you to your solicitation response where you can continue to respond to an RFO or you can get started responding. And then you have your vendor information, okay? This is information for you about the bid stamp, about the RFOs, about things that you need to know. So it's kind of a little check. Then you have your about DIR and contact DIR. Those are your menu options for the bid stamp portal. Next. Open solicitations. So this is where we're going to be most of the time as we prepare to respond to this RFO. Next slide. Here we go. So you're going to go in, you're going to log in, you're going to go to open solicitations, and you're going to click on RFO number DIR-CPO-TMP-584. So there are going to be several posted RFO. Make sure you select the correct one. Okay. So you will navigate to the RFO number detail page. Next slide. So here we go. This is your RFO page. When you log in, you got choices. You're going to respond to the solicitation, right? On this screen, you're going to see your start date of the posting. You're going to see your submission deadlines. You're going to see your response deadlines. This screen will tell you when your conferences are, the answer to questions deadline, actual start date of evaluation. So this is an overall review of what we have discussed in this session. We told you all about the RFO timelines, the RFO dates. So here's where you see that. Now, the next thing you're going to look at is the 4 buttons at the top. Respond to solicitation, ask a question, subscribe to solicitation, view solicitation documents, okay? So we're going to go to those now. Next. So respond to a solicitation. That means you're going to create a response, and you can always view a response that is in progress. So if you uploaded a couple documents and you want to check to see where you are, you can do that here. You can view the response as you respond to the solicitation. Ask a question button. Well, this is easy. This is where you're going to submit all the questions regarding this solicitation. So you're going to click on it, and it's going to give you information on how to submit your questions, okay? So it's very easy. It's very self-explanatory. You really can follow easy. And remember, once the question deadline date comes up, the question button will not be accessible anymore for this solicitation. So hopefully Jared has changed the date in the system, or he's going to reopen it. One or the other. It's going to happen today. So it doesn't go blind. Anyway, then the next one is subscribe to solicitation. So this is an important button. A lot of vendors forget to do this. I am going to strongly recommend that you do it. And here's why. When you subscribe to solicitation, means every time there's an addendum or something is posted to the web, something is changed about this RFO DIR, is going to send a notification through the system. It automatically sends it, but it only sends to the vendors that subscribe to that solicitation. Just because you are responding to the solicitation doesn't mean you're subscribing to get notices about the solicitation, okay? So subscribe to a solicitation is very important. Follow the directions that it tells you once you push out the button, and then you will get notices when addendums are posted for the solicitation, okay? And then view solicitation documents. Now, it's very important that you guys remember this. Bid stamp, VIS, what we call it, it is not a place for you to download the solicitation documents. Legally, DIR posts everything on the ESBD. That's where you go. That's where you download the documents for the solicitation. Here, it only gives you a link to those documents, okay? It's very important that you know Another thing you need to know is that DIR is not legally required to provide vendors with notices. It is vendors' responsibility to check the ESBD constantly for postings and for things. DIR does go above and beyond. We always do this. We are fantastic at customer service, and we send out notice to you guys. But your notices is going to get to you only if your information is correct in our systems. We send notices to vendors registered in the CMBL. So if your CMBL account needs to be up to date in order for you to receive solicitation notices in the future, okay? The bid stamp account names, we send notices to those names. And so it's important that you keep those things up to date, email corrected, everything, so that you can get notice from DIR. But always keep in mind, it is your job to keep up with these solicitations on the ESBD. Okay, next slide. So here we got some buttons that you are gonna get familiar with on your response page, okay? Delete button, be careful with that button, okay? Because when you push it, everything you've done is gone. You have to start from scratch. So that's kind of a very, very delicate button that you wanna make sure you don't push it unless you mean it, okay? The submit button, this is a very important button. Most vendors, we have had occasions where vendors think that they submitted, but they haven't. So when you are done loading all your documents, completing all your forms, you're going to push the submit button. Make sure that it's gray. Make sure that it's done so that you know you submitted, okay? It's very, very important, because you can put all the documents you want in this page. You can upload everything. But if you don't push the submit button, it doesn't come across to the system to recognize your response. It's like if you just left it blank, it's just not going to go anywhere, and we cannot access it. We cannot see it. So it's very important that you push the submit button at the time you're ready, when everything is done, okay? You also can ask questions through this screen. As you can see, there's a button there that you can fill in and ask questions. Also, creating a pricing form. Here is a big one, folks. Big, big, big one, okay? Once the systems uploads the responses and we are ready for evaluation, if you do not have a pricing form created, we are going to have to do it for you in order for you to move to negotiations. I mean, move to evaluation. Sorry, I meant evaluation. So creating a pricing form is a critical piece of the evaluation process. Pricing is 40% of your score. So you want to make sure you fill this out. Also, you will fill out the spreadsheet that Jared put it on the RFO as an appendix. You will fill that out, that exhibit, and you will turn that in with your response. In addition to that, you will create a pricing form on the bid stamp system. So yes, you are doing it twice. However, Jared's going to walk you through creating the pricing form in bid stamp after I complete my presentation, and you guys need to pay attention because this is very, very important. We need the spreadsheet to do a lot of the work that we do behind the scenes, to do a lot of evaluating, to do pricing comparison, to do pricing analysis. We need the pricing form in bid stamp in order for you to be evaluated, because only the system does. It's all mathematical. And it's all, we don't touch it. So you guys need to make sure you do this right. If there's anything else you're going to pay attention to about what I say today, this is a big one. Okay. And then you have one Ed Hub subcontracting form. Very important button there. So you guys need to fill in. You need to send in your response, right? Now, we have a section here, vendor references. I strongly recommend that you do not use this button. It is a courtesy, but because we're going to tell you from experience that DIR will not guarantee your references just because you're using the system. Again, this is something we provide you to assist you in submitting your references to your customers, but it's not something DIR is going to be responsible for. So one of the things I learned from experience is that if I was you, I would send my reference form to my customers via email and have them CC you when they respond or submit their references to DIR. So you're not calling us and saying, did my reference submitted yet? Can you check? We cannot open the email box for this solicitation till the day opening. It's legally, it's like if we were opening the solicitation ahead of time. We cannot do that legally. We cannot tell you if your references came in. That's why I always say, tell your customers to please CC you when they submit their reference to our email box for the RFO. That way you have proof that you got your references in. And then if we don't have them, you can always tell us this is when they sent it, and we can search for it in the system if it didn't make it through, okay? So that's also very important. Something else to learn, when uploading documents, the number one reason you will get error messages within Bitstamp is your file name is too big, okay? So please follow the file name conventions. I'm sure Jared has this on the RFO page. There's a page which says submission, and it gives you how to name each exhibit. Most people want to keep the form name the way it was submitted and post it to the ESBD, and then add something to that name. That causes the name to be too big. You can only do 80 characters, and I strongly recommend you make it less than that. That way you don't get errors messages, and you will be able to upload your documents easy without problems. But 9 out of 10, it's going to be your file name that's going to cause error messages when you uploading your documents, okay? Next slide. All right, I'm passing it over to Jared. If you guys have any question about Bitstamp, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanya. Okay, next we're going to take a look at the itemized pricing sheet, or Exhibit E, in the RFO package. Next slide, please. So section 2.3 goes over the requirements for Exhibit E. Please read those carefully. But for purposes of getting a pricing and evaluation for the RFO, for products, services, and related services as it applies, so they're priced and discounted in the Excel spreadsheets attached as Exhibit E. You have to respond as detailed in the RFO, an Exhibit E pricing sheet for each product, service, and/or related service that you want to be evaluated under the RFO. As we always say with everything else, failure to respond as instructed can result in disqualification from evaluation. Products and services pricing. So for purposes of the RFO, there's 3 tabs in Exhibit E. And you have to complete any that are applicable. So I know we have different categories for the brand product detail, right? So it's going to be products, related services, and cloud services. So tab 1 is instructions. Tab 2, again, is brand product detail. Please don't make any changes to those formulas. They're there to help us calculate. And make sure you copy and paste those formulas. So if there's more lines than we have on there, which I'm sure there will be, please make sure that you're copying down those formulas as well. Next slide, please. Double check your formulas. You shouldn't have to do anything. Just make sure they're there. And please don't change the spreadsheet format, right? We have an expectation when we go in of what we're going to be looking at and where everything's going to be. So it would be helpful if it looks the way we expect it to when it comes in. Tab 3 is a volume discount. So we always encourage respondents to offer volume pricing, right? Because it's better for our customers. So if you can, please provide discount for products or services on the spreadsheet and show the volume and fill out all the columns there. This is an important one. So you can propose by product or service category, brand, which here could pretty much be Oracle, or any group of products or services that is applicable to your pricing structure if the discount for the MSRP for those things is the same, right? So if you have a category and your discount is the same across the entire category and there's an applicable MSRP, you can list that as a categorical discount as opposed to listing every item that falls into that category. It saves a lot of time. So also, the DIR customer price should include all shipping, handling fees, and the DIR admin fee. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the mandatory submissions. What do you have to have in your response to ensure that you have a complete package? Next slide, please. So obviously, we talked about it before. Exhibit A needs to be provided and it has to be signed. Also, along with Exhibit A, if you have any canceled contracts, you have to complete attachment 1 to Exhibit A. Exhibit B, your respondent history and experience. Exhibit C, your contract marketing and support plan, your hub subcontracting plan, Exhibit D, your itemized pricing sheet, Exhibit E, and your reference forms, Exhibit F. And again, those have to be submitted by customers through the email that's provided on that reference form sheet. Again, you can't submit those. Your references have to submit those to us. Next slide, please. Continue on Exhibit G, your release of liability. Then we have the 3 accessibility documents where they apply. Then you have the, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Exhibit H, your EDGAR certification form, and then our 3 accessibility forms. Your letters of authorization. Again, those have to be signed for any brands that you may be providing as a third party or a reseller. Your signed addenda. So any addenda that we post will have a signature block. You've got to sign to acknowledge that you've read, understand, and agree to those. And then in Bitstamp, as Vanya was talking about, you need to create your price form from your Exhibit E itemized price sheet. Next slide, please. And lastly, regarding those mandatory submissions, the DIR has the sole discretionary authority and reserves the right to reject any and all responses received as a result of this RFO. Responses that don't comply with the mandatory submission requirements can be rejected. In addition, we reserve the right to accept or reject in whole or in part any responses submitted and to waive minor technicalities when it is in the best interest of the state. Next slide, please. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. And if you have any questions, please feel free to add it to the questions tab. Again, I want to reiterate, so I do intend for there to be an addendum post in the next couple of days that will extend that question deadline. So don't panic if you don't have all of your questions in right now. But I will say any questions that we do receive here, whether we answer them or not, we'll take a record of that and we'll include that on a later addendum when all the questions come in, and we'll provide responses to those as another addendum. Again, questions we answer today are not official until they're posted. You can submit additional questions through the Bitstamp BIS. And as Vanya said, I did extend that date in anticipation of that addendum being posted. So the door should not slam shut at the end of the day today for questions. With that, we'll go ahead and take a break and we'll see you at 2:13. Okay, 213. Welcome back, everybody. Looks like we have a couple of questions. We'll walk through those really quickly, and then we'll have a quick recap at the end, and we'll. So it looks like the two questions are actually related. It's regarding the language in the RFO stating that DIR intends to transition away from branded contracts. So, and it's accurate that we do intend to complete that transition prior to the end of the initial term. Whether or not that happens, we do have those renewals in place. And that language is in there essentially to in anticipation of the agency policy change regarding how we categorize our solicitations. I won't get into too much detail about that decision process because that is above my my pay grade. But we do have those extensions, or excuse me, the renewals in there should that transition not take place prior to the ending of the first term. And that's agency-wide. It's not just Oracle branded or any of the other branded contracts that we have. And it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So let's go to the next slide. So just as a reminder, questions that we answered today, which there was only one, are unofficial until we post them on the ESBD in an addendum. And any changes to the RFO will be posted as an addendum under the DIR-CPO-TMP-584 number on the ESBD. And again, it is the responsibility of vendors to monitor the ESBD website for addenda. I would say keep an eye out, again, because I intend to have an addenda posted in the near future regarding the extended date for questions and the extended date for response submission. Well, it looks like we have another question here. Bit pricing, will the pricing should be pre-formatted to match the RFO spreadsheet? So the bid stamp pricing sheet won't look exactly the same, but I will say if you have any questions whenever you're trying to enter that or create that, you can send them to me and we'll get you sorted out. Okay, next slide, please. Just another look, and I have additional information here. So again, right as it stands today, the deadline for submitting questions is today at 5. However, I do anticipate that deadline being extended to January 10th. And then the deadline for vendor references and submission of RFO responses is, as it stands today, January 18th, 2024. I do anticipate that being extended to February 1st, 2024 at 2:00 p.m. Central Time. And from that point, we'll evaluate. That will change the evaluation. Sorry, will change from January to February, obviously, 2024 until completed. Next slide, please. If you have any other questions or inquiries, just send them to me at the email here. Again, I'll post these slides in an addendum with that extension in the next couple of days is my intent. So that you'll have these as a reference. And we can kind of go from there. Next slide, please. Okay, and that concludes our presentation. I appreciate everybody's time. I know we're close to the holidays. I appreciate you showing up. If I don't talk to anybody before then, I hope you have a great holidays, and thank you again. We look forward to seeing your responses.